Trump just put a deadline on ending this war, not a vague promise, not the usual when they surrender or very soon. An actual specific on-the-record timeline, 2 to 3 weeks. The President of the United States just told the American public that this conflict with Iran will be finished in 2 to 3 weeks. And hours later, Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed it in an exclusive interview. Weeks, not months. That is the exact phrase Rubio used. Weeks, not months. I am Michael Turner. And this is the most politically significant statement the Trump administration has made since this war began, because for the first time, they have committed to a deadline, set a clock, made a promise that can be measured, verified, and held against them. And that raises 3 questions that every American should be demanding answers to right now. Is this timeline realistic? What happens politically if Trump is wrong? And what exactly are these objectives Rubio says will be achieved in weeks? Because after all the bombing, all the casualties, all the rising gas prices, the administration has never once clearly defined what victory actually looks like. So when Trump says 2 to 3 weeks and Rubio says weeks, not months, what are they actually promising? Let me walk you through Trump's exact words, what Rubio confirmed, what the evidence on the ground actually shows, and why this timeline is either the most important statement of this war or the most reckless political gamble any president has made in decades. Start with Trump's statement. He was speaking to reporters at the White House this morning, asked about the duration of the conflict, asked how long American forces will remain engaged, and Trump said this: "We are very close to finishing this. Iran knows they cannot win. They have been devastated. Their military is destroyed. Their leadership is dead, and they are ready to accept our terms." I would say 2 to 3 weeks, maybe less. We are moving very quickly, hitting targets faster than anyone thought possible. And Iran is breaking. So yes, 2 to 3 weeks, and this will be over. That is a clear, specific, unambiguous timeline, 2 to 3 weeks from today. Trump has claimed the war was almost over before, has said Iran was close to surrender multiple times, but he has never given an actual date range until right now. And today, Rubio backed every word of it. Rubio was in France for a G7 foreign ministers meeting. Al Jazeera asked him directly how long the war would continue. And Rubio said this: "Communication between Tehran and Washington is ongoing, mostly through intermediaries. Pakistan is facilitating, and we believe our objectives will be achieved in weeks, not months." The Trump administration is committed to ending this war as quickly as possible while ensuring that Iran can never threaten the United States or our allies again. Those objectives will be met in a matter of weeks. This is coordinated messaging. The President and the Secretary of State, same day, same story, same timeline. The entire administration is now on record. The war ends in weeks. Victory is imminent. Iran will surrender soon. So is it true? Let me show you what is actually happening on the ground, because the evidence does not support a 2 to 3 week timeline, not even close. Trump claimed Iran's military is destroyed. That is partially true. The U.S. and Israel have struck over 11,000 targets, destroyed roughly 2/3 of Iran's weapons production facilities, killed Iran's supreme leader and dozens of senior commanders, degraded air defenses significantly, eliminated much of the Iranian Navy, damaged critical infrastructure across the country. Iran's military is meaningfully weaker than it was when this war began, but destroyed? No. Iran is still launching missiles at Israel and at American bases. Just recently, Iran fired multiple waves of missiles at Israel, striking Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, killing civilians, wounding an 11-year-old girl. Iran struck an oil tanker off Qatar's coast, hit a Kuwaiti tanker in Dubai waters with a drone, hit Israel's largest oil refinery, engulfed it in flames with smoke visible for miles. If Iran's military was destroyed, none of those attacks would be happening. If Iran was broken and ready to surrender, it would not be escalating strikes on Israeli energy infrastructure while Trump is on television telling America the war is almost over. The evidence shows Iran is hurt, weakened, under immense pressure, but not defeated, not surrendering, and not 2 to 3 weeks from accepting American terms. Now look at the diplomatic reality. Because Trump and Rubio both claim negotiations are progressing, that Iran is ready to accept demands. But the actual state of negotiations tells a completely different story. Pakistan is mediating. That part is true. Pakistan's foreign minister confirmed his country is facilitating indirect talks. The U.S. has presented 15 demands through Pakistan as a framework for ending the war. Those demands include complete dismantlement of all nuclear enrichment facilities, permanent cessation of uranium enrichment, full international inspections of all Iranian sites, elimination of Iran's ballistic missile programs, complete withdrawal of all support for Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and other proxy forces, reopening of the Strait of Hormuz with no restrictions, acceptance of a permanent U.S. military presence in the Gulf, payment of reparations to Gulf states, and recognition of Israel. Those are the 15 points, and Iran has rejected all of them. Iran submitted its own counterproposal with 5 conditions: war reparations from the United States for bombing Iranian cities, full Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz with Iran controlling all transit, no foreign military presence in the Gulf region, lifting of all existing sanctions, and recognition of Iran's right to peaceful nuclear enrichment. Those are Iran's terms, and the U.S. has rejected them entirely. So let me be direct about what the negotiations actually look like right now. The U.S. is demanding complete surrender. Iran is demanding compensation and sovereignty. There is no middle ground being explored, no compromise on the table, no bridging proposal in development, just 2 completely incompatible positions being exchanged through Pakistani intermediaries while both sides keep fighting. And yet Trump says the war ends in 2 to 3 weeks. How? If the diplomatic positions are this far apart, if Iran is still launching missiles every day, if the Strait of Hormuz is still disrupted, how does Trump plan to deliver on this promise? There are only 3 explanations, and none of them are comfortable. The first explanation is that Trump is lying. He knows the war will not end in 2 to 3 weeks, but he is saying it anyway for political reasons, to calm markets, to reassure allies, to keep his political base supportive, to buy himself breathing room before public opinion turns decisively against the war. This would not be the first time. Trump has claimed progress repeatedly throughout this conflict, claimed Iran agreed to terms, claimed a deal was close, claimed the war was almost over. Every single time, Iran denied it. Every single time, the fighting continued. So lying about a 2 to 3 week timeline would fit a very clear and well-established pattern. But the consequences of this lie would be severe. Because if Trump says 2 to 3 weeks and the war is still raging when that window closes, his credibility does not just take a hit, it collapses. Voters stop believing anything he says about the war. Allies stop trusting American commitments. And the political pressure to end the conflict on any terms becomes overwhelming. Trump would be forced to either escalate dramatically to force a quick victory or negotiate a deal that looks indistinguishable from defeat. Neither option is good. The second explanation is that Trump is planning a massive escalation, something that would force Iranian capitulation within the stated window. The most likely candidate is a ground operation targeting Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal, which handles roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports. The U.S. has already deployed an amphibious assault force to the Persian Gulf. Seizing Kharg would devastate Iran's economy overnight and create leverage that weeks of bombing has not been able to produce. But a ground operation against Iranian territory is not a surgical maneuver. It is an act of war at a completely different scale than anything this conflict has involved so far. Iran has explicitly warned that any foreign troops on Iranian soil will be met with fierce and total resistance. American casualties in that scenario would be a different order of magnitude than what this war has produced, and the political, diplomatic, and humanitarian consequences would reshape the entire conflict. If Trump is planning this, then 2 to 3 weeks makes strategic sense. Seize Kharg, cut off revenue, forced negotiations from total economic desperation. But if American troops get pinned down, if casualties mount, if the operation drags beyond a week, the political fallout would make the Afghanistan withdrawal look like a minor news cycle. The third explanation is energy infrastructure destruction. Trump has already threatened this explicitly, has said if Iran does not agree to terms, the U.S. will obliterate every power plant, every oil well, every refinery in the country. What if the 2 to 3 week timeline is built around a plan to launch the most devastating bombing campaign this war has seen, specifically targeting Iran's entire energy sector, destroy power generation, and plunge a country of 90 million people into darkness, destroy oil wells and eliminate the revenue that keeps the government functioning, destroy refineries and collapse the supply chains that move food and medicine, make conditions so unbearable for ordinary Iranians that the population demands their government accept any terms to stop the bombing. This would be total war in the most literal sense, not targeting military sites, not surgical strikes, deliberate, systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure designed to break a civilian population. The humanitarian consequences would be catastrophic beyond any normal calculation, and the international condemnation would be severe enough to isolate the United States from most of its traditional allies. But Trump might believe it would work, might believe that 2 to 3 weeks of that campaign would force surrender faster than any amount of conventional bombing has managed. If that is the plan, the timeline is coherent. The plan itself is not. Now let me tell you why this timeline matters politically in a way that goes beyond the military question. By giving a specific time frame, Trump has set expectations that the American public will hold him to. In 2 to 3 weeks, people will expect results, will expect Iran to have surrendered, will expect the Strait of Hormuz open, will expect gas prices falling, will expect some visible, tangible sign that the war is actually ending. If that does not happen, Trump cannot spin his way out of it, cannot blame the media, cannot blame Democrats, cannot redefine what winning means. He said 2 to 3 weeks. His Secretary of State confirmed it on record in a major international interview. The entire administration is committed. And the political consequences of failure would arrive at exactly the wrong moment. Gas prices remain near $4 per gallon. The broader economy is showing stress. Voters who have been tolerating the war because they believe it will end soon will not tolerate it indefinitely. And the only reason that political tolerance has held is that Trump keeps promising resolution is imminent. But if imminent keeps moving forward, if 2 to 3 weeks becomes another empty promise in a long list of them, the base starts asking questions that have no good answers. Why is this taking so long? What exactly are we winning? Why are gas prices still this high? Why are Americans still in danger abroad? Trump has bet his credibility on this timeline, has committed himself and his administration to a specific deadline, and now he has to deliver on it or face a political reckoning he cannot postpone. But here is what makes the timeline even harder to believe. Iran's new leadership is not behaving like a government preparing to surrender. Iran's supreme leader sent a message to Hezbollah recently. It was among his first major communications since taking the position, and the message was explicitly defiant. He told Hezbollah that Iran would continue supporting the group and the resistance against Israel and the United States, not until a negotiated peace is reached, not until this war ends, indefinitely, permanently, as a matter of principle. He praised Hezbollah fighters for their loyalty and their sacrifices, encouraged them to continue fighting, framed Iranian support for regional proxy forces as a commitment that no amount of bombing could change. That is not the message of a government preparing to accept American terms within weeks. That is not the tone of a leadership structure that is broken and ready to surrender. That is the message of a government that has decided to absorb the punishment, maintain the resistance, and wait out the political clock in Washington. And Iran's leader has not appeared in public since taking the position, has been operating from an undisclosed location, ruling from the shadows. Whether that reflects security concerns, medical issues from injuries sustained in strikes, or deliberate strategy is not entirely clear. But what is clear is that a government whose supreme leader is in hiding and whose first major communication is a defiant message of continued support for proxy forces is not a government that is 2 to 3 weeks from surrender. The contradiction is not subtle. Iran is escalating attacks on Israeli and American targets. Iran's diplomatic counterproposals are incompatible with any American definition of victory. Iran's new leadership is publicly reaffirming long-term commitment to exactly the proxy network the U.S. is demanding Iran dismantle. And Trump is saying the war ends in 2 to 3 weeks. One of those things is not true. And in 2 to 3 weeks, we will know which one. I am Michael Turner. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because the clock that Trump started ticking today is the most important political timer of this entire conflict. When that window closes, either Trump delivers the most remarkable military and diplomatic victory in recent American history, or the most consequential lie about war told by any American president in decades is fully exposed. Watch this space. The next 2 to 3 weeks will tell you everything you need to know about what this war actually is and what Trump's promises are actually worth. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe the 2 to 3 week timeline? Is Trump telling the truth, or is this another political tactic designed to buy time while the war grinds on? And what happens to Trump's credibility if that window closes with Iran still fighting? I will see you in the next update.